Did cultures in ancient times interact with visitors from parallel universes who influenced their art? Some of these ancient carvings, paintings, and artifacts seem to depict a world that doesn't really match with our own historical records. I mean, what does this cave art look like it's depicting? If you were to ask me, I'd say someone had just watched a bunch of Bob Lazar documentaries and then decided to paint some aliens onto some rocks. The thing is, these cave paintings are tens of thousands of years old. These are depictions of what are called Wanjinas by ancient tribes in Australia. These tribes, found in the Kimberley region of northwestern Australia, have culture and traditions that have been alive for at least 60,000 years, maybe even older. The Wanjinas were described as sky beings, or spirits from the clouds who came down from the Milky Way during dream time. They created the earth and all its inhabitants. The legend goes that these beings spent some time on earth creating, teaching, and being gods to the Aboriginal people. Eventually, the Wanjinas disappeared. Some descended into the earth, while others returned to the sky and can be seen at night as moving lights. So, you know, by the sounds of that, maybe the alien connection isn't that far off after all. I find this super fascinating because, I mean, damn, these things really do look like your classic bulging-eyed, light-skinned gray that 90% of alien encounters are described looking like. So, did these beings really exist? Were they entities from deep in space or a parallel universe, or is this all just very coincidental? Are these ancient Indian rock paintings depicting visitors from space or another realm? One archaeologist definitely thinks so. Back in July of 2014, the State Department of Archaeology and Culture reached out to the Indian Space Research Organization for help with some ancient rock paintings found in caves near Charama in the Kankar district. Archaeologist J.R. Bhagat has been studying these rock paintings and believes they could be around 10,000 years old, which is pretty insane because some of these things look a lot like the types of sci-fi aliens we imagine today. Bhagat thinks these cave paintings depict extraterrestrials and UFOs. You've got large humanoid figures that look like they're descending from the sky, some with what look like helmets or antenna, and a disc-shaped craft with 3 rays coming from its base. It's kind of hard to look at some of these things and see anything else but aliens and UFOs, and as if it couldn't get any more uncanny, locals have told stories passed down from generation to generation about beings known as the Rohilla people, which translates to the small-sized ones. But according to these legends, the Rohilla people would come down from the sky in round flying objects and whisk away villagers who would never be seen again. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The Abydos carvings have been a hot topic of debate for years. Found in the ancient temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt, among your usual hieroglyphs and carvings, there's a set of strange images that really do look like modern-day aircraft and vehicles. I mean, take a look at these things. One kind of looks like a helicopter. Some say the one on the top right there looks like a submarine. I kind of see a yacht myself. Below that, you have what looks like a jet plane or an advanced spacecraft of some kind, perhaps. It's easy to see why there are a lot of wild theories about these carvings. One of the most popular theories is that these carvings are a sign that there could have been advanced technology in ancient Egypt, possibly influenced by extraterrestrials. That aliens visited Earth thousands of years ago and shared their technology with the ancient Egyptians. So the Egyptians were just carving what they saw onto the temple walls. Again, if this really was the case, who were these beings? Were they aliens from a distant world, or were they people visiting from far in the future or a parallel universe? One of the most famous and mysterious artifacts of the ancient Maya is this sarcophagus lid right here. This is the lid of Pakal the Great's sarcophagus, found in the Temple of Inscriptions in Mexico. Pakal was a powerful Mayan king who ruled from 615 to 683 AD. When his tomb was discovered, the carvings on his sarcophagus lid had archaeologists pretty confused. The lid shows Pakal in a strange pose, lying on his back, surrounded by all these intricate carvings of what really looks like complex machinery. Kind of looks like he's sitting in some kind of cockpit with his hands on controls and his feet operating pedals. Kind of looks like there's a bit of smoke also billowing out the side. sides. Some think it looks like he's piloting a spacecraft, or at least some sort of highly advanced piece of machinery for the time. So what was this meant to depict? Did the ancient Mayans have access to technology we have no physical knowledge of? And could this piece and others like it somehow have crossed over from another reality where there was advanced technology like this back then? Who knows? The Piri-Reis map is incredibly weird. It's an old map made way back in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral named Piri-Reis. What's so mysterious about it though? Well, it shows parts of the world that shouldn't have been known about back then, like Antarctica drawn also without ice. And everything is drawn with a surprising amount of accuracy. Many historians have looked at the map, or what's left of it, which is only about a third, and most agree that it just doesn't seem like something that could have been made at the time. So there are all sorts of conspiracy theories about how Piri-Reis would have made the map. Some say he had access to ancient maps from Atlantis or some other lost civilization. And you know what I'm gonna say next? Was there some help from an advanced visitor or visitors? It's impossible to say. All we can do is ponder how this guy seemed to know so much about places that wouldn't get explored fully until many centuries later. A woman named Pam Reynolds was brain dead for over an hour. Somehow, she came back describing things she couldn't have possibly known. In 1991, Reynolds underwent a rare procedure called a standstill operation to remove a brain aneurysm. Her body temperature was lowered significantly, her heartbeat and brain activity were completely stopped, and her eyes were taped shut. She was clinically dead, and yet, after she was revived, she gave eerily accurate descriptions of the operating room. She even described the exact surgical tools being used and recounted conversations between doctors. That's because when she was under, she claimed that she floated out of her body and saw herself laying on the table before being pulled toward a tunnel of light. She said she met dead relatives there who communicated with her without speaking, and that she needed to be convinced to return to her body, which of course she did. But what exactly happened here? How could someone with no brain function, no sensory input, describe real-time events in such clear detail? Till this day, there's never been a definitive explanation for this. Ong's Hat was a real village in New Jersey, now abandoned. In the late 80s though, pamphlets and documents started surfacing claiming secret experiments happened there involving interdimensional travel. So a group called the Institute for Chaos Studies allegedly set up a lab in the Pine Barrens. There they built a device known as the Egg, a sensory deprivation pod meant to alter consciousness. The theory was that under the right conditions, the pod could shift someone into a parallel universe. Well, supposedly it worked. Some of the researchers vanished, remaining in some alternate version of Earth. These so-called documents circulated in zines and early internet forums. Nowadays, this is mostly seen as a hoax, and I'm sure a lot of people also saw it that way back then, but some still insist there was something strange actually going on here, that maybe, at the very least, the story was some sort of cover-up for actual experiments with, fictional elements used to discredit anything and distract people from anything disturbing that was actually happening. I don't know, what do you guys think of this one? Bold Street has become a rather infamous area in Liverpool, where dozens of people have claimed to experience time slips. One story goes that a young woman named Imogen had gone shopping for some things for her sister's new baby. As she walked toward the corner of Lord Street in Whitechapel, she was excited to see a new mother care store that she hadn't noticed before. Inside, she browsed through items like baby cardigans and bibs, surprised at how cheap everything was. When she went to pay with her credit card at the front, the cashier looked confused and called the manager over. The manager turned and told Imogen that they didn't accept credit cards, only cash. Since she had none on her, Imogen left empty-handed, but when she told her mother what happened, her mom looked stunned. The mother care store had closed years ago, and the spot was now a bank, the very bank her mom used. And that's not the only weird story to come out of Bold Street. In 2006, a young man named Sean was caught shoplifting in Liverpool. While fleeing down Hanover Street, he turned into Brooks Alley, a dead end. As he caught his breath, he suddenly felt strange, like the air had thickened. He basically just waited for the security guard to follow, but no one came. Confused, Sean stepped back out into Hanover Street and instantly knew something was wrong. The street looked older. The cars were vintage. Roadworks he'd seen earlier were gone. People walked by in these outdated clothes, and there were traffic lights where there shouldn't be any. Sean pulled out his phone. There was no signal. He rushed towards Bold Street and spotted a newspaper stand. The date on the paper was May 18th, 1967. Terrified, Sean ran to a jewelry store, where he pulled out his phone again, and this time, it worked. Just like that, he was back in the present. Later, when he told his story to the local press, he repeated it in the exact same way every time, and while people assumed he made it up to dodge shoplifting charges, the newspaper followed up, and not only did they find his account consistent, but all the historical details he described, down to the clothes, the street layout, businesses, they were accurate for Liverpool in 1967. Even the security guard kinda backed it up. He said when he chased Sean into Brooks Alley, the kid had simply vanished. On November 9th of 1986, Spanish industrial expert Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving from Seville to Alcalá del Guadera late at night. He knew the road well, but suddenly after a curve everything changed. The road widened into 3 massive lanes in each direction, surrounded by tall, strange buildings that he didn't recognize. On one side were huge glowing industrial buildings, on the other were these towering apartment buildings with 20 floors or so. None of it made sense, and things just got weirder from there. Pedro started to feel a wave of heat inside his car, along with strange voices, almost like a distant choir. One voice told him he'd been transported to another country or possibly another planet by extraterrestrials. And for the next couple hours he drove through this strange place, even stopping a couple times to walk along the roadside and study the odd grass and the bizarre traffic. Noticed that cars passed him every 8 minutes or so, like clockwork. Eventually, Pedro reached a road sign with directions to his home, or where he was coming from. Well, he chose to retrace his steps, but he suddenly found himself parked in front of his house, and he had no memory of how he got there. He tried to retrace his path, but the wide roads, the buildings, and the strange signs were gone now. And somehow the trip, which should have only taken him about 30 minutes, had lasted over 3 hours, and he'd burned way more fuel than normal.
What if some of the most iconic cities and monuments on Earth weren't just locations in history, but actual gateways to parallel universes? The idea of alternate dimensions has fascinated scientists, with many suggesting that certain ancient and modern sites could be more than meets the eye. From the cosmic alignments of Angkor Wat to the mysterious energy readings around the pyramids of Giza, some believe these places might hold the key to interdimensional travel. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Lost City of Z. Have you ever heard of the Lost City of Z? This legendary place has been a source of fascination for explorers for over a century. Picture this: British explorer Percy Harrison Fawcett, completely obsessed with finding this mythical city believed to be hidden deep in the Amazon jungle. In 1925, Fawcett, his son, and a companion ventured into the jungle and vanished. Gone without a trace. Now people think the Lost City of Z wasn't just about gold, but maybe a super advanced civilization with knowledge way beyond our time. Some even whisper that this city isn't just lost to history, but perhaps tucked away in another dimension, hidden from our everyday view. Locals share eerie stories of energy vortexes and strange disappearances in the Amazon, adding fuel to the fire that the Lost City might exist in a whole other plane of existence. Could it be lost not to time, but to another world entirely? Machu Picchu, perched high in the Peruvian Andes, is more than just an ancient engineering marvel, it's a total head-scratcher. Imagine building something with such impossibly precise stonework, and yet we still don't fully know why it was built. Was it just a religious site, or something more? Some folks believe that the site, with its weird energy fluctuations and its seemingly impossible alignment with the stars, might be a portal to another dimension. Over the years, plenty of visitors have reported feeling time distortions and inexplicable energy surges while wandering through the ruins. Could it be that Machu Picchu's remote location, high in the mountains, holds more than just the secrets of an ancient civilization? Maybe it hides the key to a gateway to realms beyond our own. What do you think? Imagine a city carved into red sandstone cliffs. That That's Petra, in Jordan. Once a bustling trade hub, it was mysteriously abandoned by the 7th century. Petra's intricately detailed tombs and temples are undeniably beautiful, but its purpose might be way stranger than we actually realize. Some theorists believe that Petra was a place of immense mystical power, and the very stones that form the city might be part of an ancient mechanism designed to open gateways to other realms. Hidden deep within its structures are caves and tombs, possibly acting as energy conduits to other dimensions. Could Petra have been a city not just of commerce, but of interdimensional significance? The evidence of advanced knowledge found in the city suggests there's more to Petra than meets the eye. Perhaps it's a portal that's been closed off to the world for centuries. It's a fascinating mystery, isn't it? Legend says that deep within the earth, hidden beneath the icy peaks of the Himalayas, lies the mythical underground city of Agartha. Imagine a city that's the last refuge of a super advanced civilization, one that escaped cataclysms that destroyed surface life thousands of years ago. And while no one's found physical evidence yet, many accounts from explorers and spiritual seekers hint at a network of tunnels and hidden pathways beneath the earth leading to this legendary city. Could Agartha be more than just a metaphor for an enlightened society? Could it be a literal underground civilization existing on a different vibrational plane, accessible only to those who know the ancient secrets? Reports of strange mystical experiences in the Himalayas, from sudden shifts in time to mysterious lights, suggest that Agartha may be a gateway to alternate realities. It's a pretty wild idea, right?
This one comes out of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, back in September 1st of 1969. That night, dozens of people claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky over Sheffield. Some described them as being attached to a disc-shaped craft, and even stranger, a lot of witnesses said they couldn't account for chunks of time after watching it. It wasn't just like, I saw lights and went home. People felt like something really happened to them. One of the most talked about witnesses is Thomas Reed. He was only 9 at the time, riding in a car with his mom, brother, and grandmother. He said they first saw glowing orbs shoot out from the trees along the road. When they got near the Sheffield Bridge, things got even weirder. It came to a stop off the right side of the road. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. There was like a barometric change in pressure. It was just like a dead silence. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud, and that was it, end quote. Next thing they knew, they were back in the car, but 2 hours had passed. His mom and grandmother had even switched seats, and no one could explain how. Reed later said they regained flashes of memory about being inside some massive hangar with curved hallways, and other people were there too. As for where they were, who the hell knows? This next story was shared by a now deleted Reddit user and goes as follows. Okay, I don't really know how to explain this without sounding insane, but I've been thinking about it for years and I still can't make sense of it. Back in 2016, I was driving home from my job around 2 a.m. I live in a small town, so the roads are usually dead quiet at that time. There's one stretch of highway I always take that goes past a gas station, then about a 15-minute straight before I hit my exit. Well, this time though, something was off. I passed the gas station like usual, but when I looked at the digital clock in my car, it said 2:17. I swear it had been 2:04 the last time I checked. Right as I passed the station, that stretch of road normally takes 15 minutes, but somehow it felt like it just skipped. I don't remember zoning out, I don't remember seeing anything weird. It was just like the time jumped forward and I was closer to home than I should have been. The creepier part is the gas station itself. For a couple months after that, whenever I drove by it, the lights were off. The pumps were wrapped in yellow tape and the sign was taken down. When I asked a coworker about it, they told me that gas station has been shut down for years, but I know I stopped there plenty of times and I definitely remember seeing it open that night. I don't have proof, I know it sounds like bad memory or whatever, but I can't shake the feeling that I've somehow crossed into a place where things aren't exactly the same. On October 11th, 1973, 2 guys from Mississippi, Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson, went out night fishing in the Pascagoula River. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, but then Parker noticed blue lights hitting the water. At first he figured it was the cops telling them to pack it up, but what came next was nothing close to that. A big light came out of the clouds. Parker later said it was a blinding light. It was hard to tell with the lights so bright, but it looked like it was shaped like a football, about 80 foot. It made a very loud sound. It was just a hissing noise, end quote. Then 3 strange floating creatures came out of the craft. They didn't have legs, and Parker said they had mitten-shaped claws. One was gray and didn't have a neck. Another looked more feminine. When one of them reached for Parker, instead of panicking, he suddenly felt calm. I think they injected us with something to calm us. I was kind of numb and went along with the program, he said. Both men claimed they were pulled aboard the craft and examined. Hickson remembered. There were no seats, no chain. They just moved me around and I couldn't resist them. I just floated, felt no sensation, no pain. He also described a giant eye-like machine scanning them. He reported everything to the sheriff that night, and deputies secretly recorded them afterward, expecting them to slip up. Instead, they caught the men whispering in fear. Jesus Christ, God have mercy, they had us. They could have done anything to us, Hickson said. For decades, Parker stayed mostly quiet, only writing a book in 2018 after Hickson's death, and that's when other locals came forward saying they saw something strange in the sky that very same night. In 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Villas-Boas claimed he was abducted by aliens. Working late in his fields to avoid the heat, he said he saw a red star approaching, which turned out to be an egg-shaped craft with a rotating red light. Boas alleged that 5-foot-tall beings in gray overalls and helmets captured him and took him aboard, where he was subjected to blood tests and a strange gas that made him violently ill. He also claimed a female alien engaged with him intimately and indicated she would raise their child in space. 4 hours later, he was released and watched as the craft just flew back up into the sky. A lot of people obviously dismissed his story, but a man named Dr. Olavo Fontes noted Boas had burns, bruising, and nausea. Boas later became a lawyer, but he never shook this incident. He'd often craft models of the UFO he claimed to have seen, and he stuck to his story till his death in 1991. A man blacks out for a few seconds and wakes up mourning a family he lived with for 10 years in another reality. A writer walks into his own backyard and finds everything just slightly off. And now Google's quantum chip might be pulling answers from other universes entirely. What if the multiverse isn't science fiction anymore? These are parallel universe stories that may prove the multiverse is real. This has become a rather infamous story on Reddit. Always reminds me of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Inner Light. So this guy takes a hit to the head and blacks out. But instead of being out for a few seconds, the guy ends up living what feels like 10 full years in a completely different life. Entirely in his head, of course. In this other version of reality, he meets a woman, falls in love, settles down, starts a family. They go grocery shopping, they argue about bills, they play with their kids in the yard. He remembers what the weather was like. He remembers birthdays. I mean, we're talking real grounded stuff here. This doesn't sound like the type of wacky nonsense that goes on in dreams. Felt like real life. 10 years of it, mind you. But one day in that world, he starts noticing something strange. There's this lamp in the living room, totally normal looking, but it doesn't fit. It starts bugging him. It's like a little glitch. And the more he stares at it, the more everything else starts to feel wrong. And that's when it all starts unraveling. Suddenly he wakes up. He's lying on the ground, surrounded by people. He's back where he was right before he blacked out. Only minutes have passed. But the man is absolutely devastated. The life he just came back to doesn't feel right anymore. He remembers his wife and kids from the other world. He misses them. They weren't real though, but the emotions were. For a long time after, he struggled. He said it felt like he was mourning people who never existed. Now, was this a case of the brain doing weird things under stress? Or did he tap into something else, a different version of his life that's playing out somewhere, a parallel universe? Ken Korzak, a writer and journalist, had one of the most bizarre experiences, writing an article claiming that he'd slipped into a parallel universe. It wasn't like a whole new world, just a slightly different version of his own home and garden. He said the differences were subtle at first. His pets, specifically his cats and chickens, were behaving completely differently than he was used to. It's like they were the same animals, but something was just off about them, like seeing them through a different lens. In his his words, it felt like everything in his yard was a few degrees askew. But the weirdest part came when he met this strange female entity. She wasn't human, at least not in the way you'd think. Korczak described her as resembling an elf or a fairy, and she seemed completely at home in this alternate reality. He also described feeling like she was there for a reason, like she was some kind of guide in this parallel world. He spent a lot of time reflecting on it, especially the strange, almost magical feeling of meeting this being. He genuinely believes that he had a real encounter with a parallel version of his home. As someone who's always been interested in the concept of alternate realities too, he dove deep, trying to make sense of it. Was this just a hallucination, or did he actually slip into another dimension for a brief moment? In December of 2024, Google made a pretty big announcement about their new quantum chip, Willow. This chip solved a problem in 5 minutes that would have taken even the fastest supercomputers 47 years. What was amazing here though wasn't just how fast the chip was, it's also what the head of Google's quantum AI team, Hartmut Nevins, said about it. He mentioned that this speed might be a sign that their quantum computers are pulling from multiple realities at once. Not just a throwaway comment, he was serious about this. Now, this ties in with something called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, which states that every decision or event causes the universe to split into different versions, creating a parallel reality for each possibility. So when a quantum computer like Willow does a calculation, it's possible that it's tapping into these other universes, running all the possibilities at once, without us even realizing it. And it's not just Google talking along these lines. Other tech companies like IBM and D-Wave have been exploring quantum computing for years, and some think this technology could eventually lead us to understand or even interact with alternate realities. It's not quite science fiction anymore. Quantum computing might be the closest thing we've got to real-world proof that the multiverse could exist.
Imagine finding a watch while you're exploring a tomb. Of course, watches have been around for quite a while at this point, but what makes the famous tiny Swiss watch so special? In 2008, archaeologists discovered a remarkable piece of metal that was the size of a ring, bearing the face of a watch that was marked specifically at 10:06. On the back was the word Swiss engraved. This was found in a tomb that had been sealed away for more than 400 years, and yet this watch was only 100 years old. How is that possible? Especially when Switzerland wasn't an established country at the time. The tomb was speculated to have been created during the Ming Dynasty that ruled from 1368 to 1644, and watches were apparently not a thing in that area at the time. My question, however, though, is how sure are we that it was sealed for that long? What are the odds that someone had gone in there prior to the archaeologist, but just decided on not taking or touching anything? It's possible, but then why did they leave the watch ring? People obviously speculate that there were maybe time travelers that left it as a clue for their existence, since many of those already exist across the internet. People love to believe we live in a simulation, with major ones being caught when watching sports. This specific video, uploaded by Highlight Heaven on YouTube, arranged a variety of clips from football that feed into this simulation theory, and there were a few that stuck out to me. The first two clips involve some very synchronized movement of football players getting up. Simultaneously, at the exact same time, their movements are mirrored perfectly, down to the hand placements, to the tempo, you name it. The biggest one that people have their eyes on is when one of the football players does this really weird, almost floating maneuver to get up. They barely use their hands as they hoist themselves from off the ground, as if all their power is coming from the balls of their feet. Sure, they have the momentum of pushing upward, but after that it looks like it's all in the foot power. But I do have a theory for these weird movements, to which I feel many of you have figured out by now. Football players are constantly practicing and drilling in certain movements, right? They've also probably been practicing the quickest and most efficient way of getting up when they get tackled, with one of these ways being the weird floating technique. I'm not a football player, but I've taken movement classes where we are drilled in certain ways of getting up properly and quickly. It's definitely a neat trick that these guys do here, and I can see how it would become an optical illusion at certain angles. The man from Torrid. I'm not sure how legit this story is, but still interesting nonetheless. On one sunny day somewhere in July in 1954, an ordinary-looking man arrived at Haneda Airport in Tokyo. There was nothing strange about the way he was dressed. sporting a nice suit and tie with a groomed beard. He was fairly familiar with Japanese, so no red flags thus far. It wasn't until officials noticed on his passport that he was coming from a country called Torrid. There is no such thing as Torrid that we're all aware of, and when this man was confronted by police as a possible fraud or threat, he got extremely frustrated and tried to explain that it is in fact real and has been around for 1,000 years. So they got him to try and explain where on the map it was located, and apparently it was supposed to be between Spain and France, but he had no idea why it wasn't showing up on our maps, as he kept repeating he's made multiple trips to Japan before. He even had papers to support his case. However, before they could take a look at them, the man suddenly disappeared from his hotel room, one that was located on the 7th floor with no balcony. The police tried to keep him there while they figured things out, so they had no clue where he went. A lot of people use this theory to support the claims of parallel universes, but I don't know. It sounds a little too good of a story to be true.
A man in Spain wakes up alone in a hospital, the year showing 2027 on every device. Yet the world around him is frozen in 2020, with entire cities completely empty. Astronomers captured a black hole's corona the size of our solar system, only to find flickers of light behaving in unexplainable ways. And in the middle of Patagonia, a camera trap caught descending lights, moving at nearly 600 miles per hour, what locals call the bad lights. This is real evidence caught on camera that parallel universes are crossing into ours. So there's this guy, Unicoso Breviente, on Instagram, who's he's got a pretty insane story. He says that he woke up in a hospital in Valencia, Spain, completely alone. No clue who he was or how he got there. Even stranger, all the electronics read 2027. He found his hospital records and discovered that he'd been admitted on February 10th, 2021, unconscious with a high fever. Now, he's been posting all these short videos exploring the city, but it's always empty. Hospitals, police stations, fire stations, metros, airports, highways, all totally void of people. Of course, folks online constantly call him out for faking it, but some of his posts are pretty intriguing. He films himself in restricted areas, even taking cars, motorcycles, and jewelry. On March 23rd, he found an old Spanish Civil War bomb shelter. In it, he found a folder. And in that folder was some very strange information pertaining to him. It said he was trapped in some other dimension between 2021 and 2027. He'd been part of some secret mission. There was also blueprints for a time machine. The folder had equations and diagrams that eventually seemed connected to a particle accelerator at the Valencia Physics Institute. Now, it's all pretty outlandish, but it does make for a pretty interesting watch. Is this dude really posting videos from some alternate dimension he's trapped in? I mean, I'd love to think that, but if nothing else, it's very creative. Astronomers recently got an incredible look at a black hole called RxJ1131, and the photo they captured is pretty cool. The black hole itself can't be seen, but the superheated gas around it, called the corona, stretches about as far as our entire solar system. When researchers looked closely at the photo, they noticed tiny flickers in the light that didn't make sense. They were only able to see this level of detail because a galaxy sitting between us and the black hole kinda acts like a giant zoom lens. The galaxy's gravity bends and magnifies the light from the black hole, creating multiple images and letting astronomers spot details they normally couldn't. Lead researcher Mattis Ryback said, quote, "Within a few days of looking at the data, we realized, okay, this does not look right. The flickers weren't coming from the black hole. They appeared independently across the images. Turns out that individual stars in the foreground galaxy were briefly magnifying different parts of the corona. By studying these flickers in the photo, the team could map the corona and even get hints about the black hole's magnetic fields. So the point is, they're getting to learn a lot about this black hole through these images. And if we know anything about black holes, it's that we really don't know a whole lot. Black holes are incredibly mysterious. What happens to things that are pulled in? Where do they go? Do they connect to other parts of the universe? Could they be portals to parallel universes? At this point, we have no idea. It was just after midnight on January 21st in Chile's Patagonia region. Quiet, empty, middle of nowhere. A wildlife camera trap set up by the University of Magallanes to study animals suddenly snapped 3 photos in the span of 2 seconds. What shows up isn't an animal though. It's a set of bright descending lights. According to biologist Alejandro Kush, quote, "Apparently these lights were initially distant, approached and remained in front of the camera, dazzling it in a movement that appears to be descending." Now, this camera wasn't near a road or houses, it was in a meadow far off from anything man-made. And these traps are designed to prevent tampering. They've got infrared, motion sensors, so this is pretty strange. But it's not the first time strange lights like this have been reported. Locals have talked about what they call bad lights. For generations they've talked about it, describing them as spirits crossing the fields at night. Scientists and UFO researchers have both looked at these photos. Some think it could be a rare plasmoid, kind of like a ball of plasma similar to ball lightning. Thing is, there were no storms, no conditions at the time that would have caused something like that. UFO researcher Freddie Alexis ran tests and calculated that if it was a distant flying object, it was moving at around 590 miles per hour. News of this just came out the other day. Last October off the coast of Yemen, a US Air Force drone captured something no one can really explain. A leaked video, handed anonymously to Congressman Eric Burleson, shows what he called an orb hovering over the water. An MQ-9 Reaper drone locks onto it and launches a Hellfire missile. One of the most destructive weapons in the US arsenal. These things are designed to shred tanks. But in the footage, the missile smashes directly into the orb and nothing happens. Journalist George Knapp described it during a hearing, saying, quote, "That's the Hellfire missile smacking into the UFO and just bouncing right off, and it kept going." The impact seemed to nudge the object slightly, even knock some debris loose, but then it just corrects its path and carries on fine. 3 military veterans confirmed what everyone was thinking. There's no human technology that can take a direct Hellfire hit and stay intact. The Department of Defense, when pressed, refused to comment. Burleson didn't speculate on exactly what the object was, but he made it clear that this was not normal. Back in 2007, a security camera at the courthouse in Santa Fe caught something weird early in the morning around 7 a.m. On the footage, there's this glowing white thing, kind of round, kind of shapeless too, just drifting across the frame. It wasn't fast or anything, just sort of floating there. People online immediately started calling it a ghost. Obviously, I mean, what else are people gonna say? Well, some said it looked more like something out of phase with reality, like we were seeing a bleed through from somewhere else entirely. The way it moves doesn't look like a reflection or a glitch. It looks like it's there, just not in the way anything else usually is. Of course, the official explanation was that it was a bug walking across the lens, and sure, it could be that, but what do you think? Does it really look like a bug? People in different parts of the world have filmed what looks like 2 suns in the sky at the same time. One bright sun and then a second one that looks slightly smaller but still glowing like a legit celestial body. Naturally, a lot of people are pretty confused about this. Some folks say it's just a lens flare. Others say that nope, that was actually in the sky. So scientists have looked into it, like Jim Kaler, an astronomer from the University of Illinois, who says it's probably some kind of atmospheric optical illusion, light bending in weird ways because of moisture or temperature layers in the air, but even he is not 100% sure what the hell's going on. Mirages usually stack vertically, like one image above the other. This double sun thing is side by side, which makes a little less sense, so no one knows exactly what causes it. Grant Perry, another scientist, flat out said this is not a common optical phenomenon. So yeah, maybe it's just a weird trick of the light, or maybe we're seeing something that we can't even begin to comprehend. So this one is pretty wild. There's a CCTV clip that's become pretty well known for how downright bizarre it is. A guy is walking down the street at night. A second man enters the frame in front of him, at which point the first guy does something super weird. The guy in the back taps the dude in the front on the shoulder right as a car whizzes by and a metal object swings out as the guy in front is about to get swatted with it. If it weren't for the tap, he would have been hit, no question. The guy who does the tapping seems completely unfazed though. He's not panicking, he doesn't even look back to check if the car's about to hit him. How did he know what was about to happen? It's also strange because he doesn't even say anything. Doesn't stick around to be like, oh damn, wasn't that nuts? It's almost like he knew exactly what was going to happen and was just doing his part to stop it. And then he's out. Naturally, the internet lost its mind with theories. The most popular one, the guy giving the warning is a time traveler. Maybe he's from the future, maybe a version of the guy in front of him from a different reality, trying to make sure his past self doesn't die in a freak accident. Could this be a huge coincidence? Maybe, but maybe not. So this is some straight up NPC behavior, except in real life. So a guy in Omsk, Russia wakes up one morning and can't find his flock of sheep. Usually he expects to find them right where he left them, but not today. He goes out looking for them and to his surprise finds the entire flock of sheep standing on top of a roof. Now there's no obvious way for these sheep to get up there, no secret sheep elevator that we know of anyway. The man assumed they'd somehow gotten spooked by something and just climbed up the roof. How the hell do a bunch of sheep get up there without making a noise or causing a ruckus? It's like they just teleported to the top, like an NPC glitch in a video game randomly appearing on a roof. Next we have space orcs. Orcs standing for odd radio circles. So what are these? Well, they're actually what the name suggests, massive circular blobs in space that show up in radio telescope images. And no one really knows what they are. They were first discovered in 2020 when astronomers were mapping the sky using Australia's ASCAP radio telescope. These huge rings appeared out of nowhere, perfectly circular, massive in size, and didn't match anything scientists had seen before. They aren't galaxies, stars, supernova remnants, or anything that usually pops up in space surveys. Some scientists think they might be the result of huge explosions or collisions far, far away, cosmic shock waves that left behind radio footprints we're just now seeing. But others think they could have something to do with galaxies which have active black holes at their centers. And then there's the more exciting possibility that orcs might be a sign of something completely new, some sort of phenomenon we just don't have a name for yet. Point is, for as much as we think we know, the world is a highly mysterious place.
Quantum fluctuations in everything would be responsible for another universe having slightly different laws of physics than ours.
Whether it's a strange World War II era disappearance that remains unsolved, multiple stories of time slips in the same English location, or a quantum thought experiment that is truly mind-melting. This list is full of the unexplained, the unusual, and the unsettling, so let's dive right in. Starting off this list today, we have the disappearance of the L8 blimp crew. The L8 blimp incident remains one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries from World War II. The blimp was initially on a patrol mission to scout for enemy submarines along the California coast. As it returned, something very unforeseen occurred. Observers on the ground noticed the blimp's erratic behavior before its descent, yet no distress signals were sent from the crew. Upon investigation, all control systems within the blimp were found operational, and personal belongings of the crew were still on board, suggesting a very sudden and unexplained disappearance. What makes this case even more intriguing is that the blimp managed to navigate and land in a densely populated area without causing significant damage or injury, almost as if it were being controlled or guided by unseen hands. The absence of any struggle or attempt to communicate by the crew has fueled speculation about paranormal activities, including theories of abduction or unintentional travel to another dimension. Despite various investigations and inquiries, no conclusive explanation has been provided, leaving the fate of the crew a mystery and a source of speculation about the potential for anomalies or breaches in our understanding of space and time. Next up on our list today, we have the Liverpool time slips. So this is something I didn't know, but apparently there is a phenomenon of time slips in Liverpool, particularly around the area known as Bold Street. These experiences typically involve individuals or groups of people feeling as though they have momentarily stepped back in time, encountering surroundings, people, and objects that appear to be from a different era. In the case of a policeman named Frank, he described seeing cars, fashion, and shop fronts that were all distinctly from the 1960s, a very stark contrast to the 1990s environment that he had come from. Even more intriguingly, upon returning to the present, he could find no logical explanation for his experience, as everything in his surroundings had returned to normal. Such incidents raise questions about the nature of time and reality, reality? Are these time slips just hallucinations, or do they offer a glimpse into a parallel universe or an alternate reality that momentarily overlaps with our own? While definitive scientific explanations remain elusive, these experiences continue to provoke curiosity, suggesting a world that is much more complex and mysterious than our conventional understanding may allow. Next up, we have the mystery of Gadianton Canyon. In 1972, the journey of 4 university women took an eerie turn when they opted for a shortcut through Gadianton Canyon, hoping to shorten their trip back to Southern Utah University from Nevada. As they ventured deep into the canyon, the familiar desert landscape transformed inexplicably into an alien terrain, marked by an unsettling quiet that blanketed the area. The road beneath them changed to gravel, and the surroundings became increasingly unfamiliar and very foreboding. The group encountered structures that defied conventional architecture, featuring angles and materials that seemed out of place and time. Most unsettling were the egg-shaped vehicles with elongated, opaque windows, unlike any cars or machinery known at the time, seemingly parked or abandoned. These elements contributed to a palpable sense of dislocation, and there was an overwhelming sense of dread. Despite the urge to explore or understand their bizarre surroundings, fear and survival instincts prevailed, prompting the girls to get out of there as fast as humanly possible. Miraculously, as they retraced their route, the surreal landscape gave way to the familiar high desert scenery of southern Utah, though no clear boundary marked the transition. Subsequent attempts to locate the strange road and its surroundings ended in vain, as no maps or local accounts could verify the existence of the places and objects they reported seeing. This very strange experience led the women, and those who later heard their story, to speculate that they might have inadvertently crossed into a parallel dimension, a brief glimpse into an alternate reality abruptly encountered and then left behind.
Do parallel universes really exist? Well, people certainly have some interesting stories to share, so today I'll be telling some parallel universe stories posted to Reddit.
Hello, we are not available now.
And we're starting things off with a very eerie story posted to Reddit by Flarengo, who writes, "This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, 'Hey, it's me. Sorry, I missed you. Call you later. Bye.' And then I hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he called back and he says, 'Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who is that girl you were talking to?' And I was like, 'What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl.' Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, as quoted above, there was a slight pause and it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I didn't recognize. You can compare it to the message I know I did leave, and the two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but, talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that recorded the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and analyzed, unfortunately. Also, neither I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky. I can't explain it. This next post was by Ninix Time, who writes about a time he may have seen parallel universe versions of his own family. The story goes like this. Around the age of 11, my family decided to go and visit my grandparents, and while we were there, I decided to go out and play around for a bit. They lived in a flat in the middle of the city. They had a road that had stores and a car park on the right, and had enough space for me to play around with my friends that lived there. As I got down and ran to that car park, a car went past that nearly crashed into me, and in that car, there were 3 passengers. A woman, her daughter, and a male driver. As I dodged that car, they looked like they had no emotions whatsoever and looked really dull. and as I focused into the car, the male driver was my dad. Very easily distinctive. And the car was our car. Same color, same car plates, same everything. I instantly ran to our car, thinking it had been stolen, but our car was sitting right there. I turned around to follow the car that nearly hit me, but it was no longer there. I ran upstairs to my grandparents' house without knowing what to do or what to say. Luckily, my sister was right by the door, and I told her the story and what I saw. She just laughed, telling me that my dad hadn't left the house yet. Next up, we have a post with the heading, Sudden and Short Shift into Parallel Universe by BB Shuri, which goes as follows. I was very much in love with a guy, and one day we were hanging out in his car, just chilling. He was telling me a story about his nephew who had a schizophrenic episode or something, and I was just listening, totally into the story, when suddenly I found myself sitting in a different car with him. This specific car was an old timer, and I had a wedding dress on. He had on a tuxedo. I remember feeling so happy and elevated, and he was a little bit grumpy because we were waiting for someone and there was this time pressure. We had to be at the venue. The scene lasted maybe 5 seconds, but everything was so real. I could feel the air, the atmosphere. I could feel my wedding dress, the temperature, the emotions, everything. I remember looking outside the window and seeing that we were parked beside a building and the person we were waiting for was in the building. The building was on a hill surrounded by nature. In a snap, I was back in the regular car with him right at the moment he was finishing his story. I have no idea what he told me. At the time, I didn't know what the frig just happened, but now I can maybe see it as a glitch into a parallel universe where we did get married. Next Reddit user is NYZ312, who discusses a very strange incident when they may have died and shown up in another timeline. They write, I've never really discussed this with anyone, but thought this may be the place to at least see what you think. I was driving down a street that is somewhat busy, 4 lanes, 2 each way, and there was a light rain. I came to a light that I wanted to turn left, across traffic. There's no dedicated turning lane. I waited till I thought it was clear, but just as I turned left, someone came around the inner opposite lane and I could see we were going to collide. I closed my eyes. The next thing I knew, I was on the street I intended to turn on, 2 blocks up on the side of the street, just sitting there, no collision. I gathered myself and went on, but I think about it a lot. My scar is on the wrong side, posted by Charming Medium. This will sound weird, but I have to share this, so I'll explain. When I was very young, I was diagnosed with leukemia. I'm now cancer-free, thankfully, but back then I had a port cath installed. It was on my left side. It was always on my left side. Once it was removed, I had a scar on my left side. I don't know how or when, but the scar is now on my right side. I can't even begin to explain how. About 3 years ago, I remember looking at my left side and being unable to find it. I looked around to see where it may have moved, but I couldn't find it. I eventually forgot about it. And sometime last year when I got out of the shower, I noticed it. It was on my right side. I asked my grandmother about it. I asked what side my port was on. As expected, she said it was my left. And she was just as confused as I was about it being on my right side. It still bothers me. And I think about it sometimes. It makes me uneasy in a way I can't explain. I always joked about the whole glitch in the Matrix stuff, the Mandela Effect and everything. I don't know what to think anymore. Posted to Reddit by Balthazar, she writes about a disturbing incident she had in class that led to a series of disturbing dreams. It started around the time I had just gotten into high school. So around the time I was about 12 to 13, I guess. It was register period on the first day back after school holidays. We all wait for our names to be read and each of us reply. The teacher reads out a name and nobody answers. Out of nowhere, I get this feeling like someone just ripped my stomach out and replaced it with ice cubes. I find it odd, but I can't shake the feeling. Anyway, about 5 minutes later, another new student enters the class and my jaw almost drops. Except for having red hair, she could have been my twin. The teacher sits her near me and I can't stop staring. She notices me and looks just as astonished. We begin a conversation, but the uneasy feeling stays with me. About 10 minutes later, the principal walks into the classroom, and I freeze and clutch the desk. Here it comes. The teacher notices and walks over to the principal. They lean in together and he whispers something to her. She nods and he steps forward facing class. "I'm sorry, class, but Miss X," the girl not present at register that morning, "has passed away over the holidays. She took her own life." I tuned out for the rest of what she said and just started crying uncontrollably, and that set off the rest of the class. The dreams started after this. I cannot say why, as I don't know. To go into each and every specific dream would be insanity. It's a very detailed. Let's just say when people I have had contact with, no matter how briefly in life, are about to die, I dream their deaths about 3 days beforehand. I will simply state that it is not possible to be mere coincidence based on how many people's deaths I have dreamt. 2 colleagues I have worked with, 3 grandparents, 1 great-grandfather, 1 friend's grandfather, 2 school teachers, 1 lady I met briefly for 5 minutes one day at work, at least 3 friends, all dead within 3 days of my dreams. Make of it what you will. So I mentioned glitches in the Matrix a bit earlier, so I want to go into more detail on that. This one is very popular online. Glitches in the Matrix are when people claim to experience weird moments where reality seems to glitch out. Like say you notice what looks to be the same person walking by twice in a row, or objects appearing or disappearing out of nowhere, just weird stuff like that. Almost like a video game that's failing to render things correctly. The idea here is that we could be living in a simulation, and every so often, the code that runs the simulation gets a little wonky. But to take it a step further, what if those glitches aren't just errors in a simulation, but signs that our universe is brushing up against another one? In theory, if parallel universes do exist, we could occasionally get a peek into them or experience moments where the fabric of space-time bends. Could be as simple as noticing a repeating pattern in your day, but your brain can't quite reconcile with what you know of reality. It's like your system glitches out because it's trying to process something from another universe that doesn't quite match up with your version. The experience of missing time. This one is a classic, especially when it comes to UFOs. There are tons of stories and cases of people driving around a desolate road late at night when they see a strange light in the sky, and then all of a sudden, hours, or sometimes even days have passed that they just have no recollection of. Missing time. Could this phenomenon be connected to parallel universes? Well, the theory is that these abductees may have actually slipped into another timeline. As for whether aliens are involved or not, who knows? Point is, something could shift in the fabric of space-time and your consciousness jumps into a new version of reality, leaving this gap in your memories. It's not so much that time was stolen from you, it's more like you temporarily just moved into another timeline, and when you returned to your own, it felt like you lost those hours. Quantum tunneling is a very bizarre phenomenon where particles can move through barriers that should, according to physics, be impossible. Picture it like a ball traveling through a solid wall instead of bouncing off it. Yes, this does happen, but the science is very hard to explain. Again though, parallel universes, could they play into this? Could particles be tunneling from one reality to another? Instead of just interacting with the particles in our universe, these particles might slip through some sort of portal into another reality. This could help explain some of the bizarre stuff we see in our world that doesn't really make sense. Random moments where the laws of physics seem to just not apply. When it comes to parallel universes, the rules we know might not work the same way, and particles that can tunnel through different dimensions, well, that could be the key to how those universes are crossing paths, even if we don't always notice. Alright, let's switch gears, head up into space. We've got all kinds of mysterious things out there. Strange lights, unexplained radio signals, objects that don't behave how we expect them to. Of course, you know where I'm going with this one, but even some scientists wonder if some of these things could be evidence of parallel universes. Take the WOW signal, for example, an unexplained radio signal detected by astronomers back in 1977 that lasted for about 72 seconds and then disappeared. No one knows where it came from or what caused it. Some think it could have come from a parallel universe, trying to communicate with ours. And yes, it sounds pretty far-fetched, and maybe it is. Maybe there's a much more mundane explanation, but also consider just how vast and mysterious space is, and how little we really understand of it. Looking at it that way, the possibility of another universe interacting with ours in some way seems pretty plausible. Every so often we hear about things that seem to appear out of nowhere. Like maybe you're in your living room, you find a book on your coffee table that you're pretty sure you didn't buy, or maybe you swear you put your keys in one place but you find them sitting in a completely different spot and no one moved them. Or the reverse, objects just disappear without a trace. Can most situations like this be chalked up to our brains just sucking at remembering things sometimes? Sure, but could there also be something else going on in very rare cases? One theory is that this could be the result of objects slipping in and out of parallel universes. Say you leave your socks sitting on the edge of your bed, but when you turn around to grab them, they're nowhere to be found. So you look all over your room only to find that they're actually sitting on your bathroom counter. What if they were simply sucked into another version of reality for a while? Maybe it was in a parallel universe for a second, but when the reality shift happens, it comes back, just not in the same place you left them. Mandela Effect. The phenomenon where a large group of people remember something in a certain way only to find out that it never actually happened that way at all. I think what's so interesting about this one is that unlike stuff like deja vu or objects going missing, situations that are a lot more likely to happen in isolation, Mandela effects are corroborated by mass amounts of people. For some context, the name Mandela Effect comes from people remembering Nelson Mandela dying in the 80s, when in fact he passed away in 2013. Some people think this is a glitch in our collective memory. Like we've all tapped into a parallel universe where things happen just slightly differently. The list of famous Mandela effects is huge and just continues to grow. From the famous Bernstein Bears versus Bernstein Bears confusion to the misremembered lines from famous movies like Star Wars and Forrest Gump. It's almost like there is a version of reality that some people are still hanging on to, still remembering, even though it never actually existed in our timeline. Again, are these just examples of our collective memory not being the most reliable, or could we just possibly be momentarily connecting to another universe where things unfolded just off to Scotland now? We have the Cocknose Stone. The Cocknose Stone is this huge rock in Scotland covered in all kinds of weird carvings. The stone is about 5,000 years old and it's covered in these swirling patterns, circles, and strange symbols. One of the coolest things about this stone is that it's massive, about 42 by 26 feet, all covered in what is essentially ancient graffiti. And as for what the carvings mean, no one knows, but some archaeologists think they might be maps of the stars or some kind of astronomical calendar of some kind. They could also be religious symbols, or there could be messages on here from something, perhaps even ancient aliens? Yeah, again, some people think aliens could have had a hand in making these carvings. Speaking of graffiti, by the way, the stone actually had to be buried in 1965 because young hooligans just wouldn't stop messing with it. Does this thing look like it's from ancient Egypt to you? I honestly thought I was looking at the steering wheel of an old tractor or something, but this object was found in 1936 in the tomb of an ancient Egyptian named Sabu. For this reason, this weird object has been referred to as the Disc of Sabu. So what the hell is it exactly? Well, your guess is as good as mine, and apparently as good as most historians or archaeologists, because they're not sure either. Of course, they can make more educated guesses than us, but the only definitive thing you can say is that this thing looks very out of place. There are strange circular structures in parts of the Middle East, often referred to as wheels. They're found in spots in Syria and Saudi Arabia. They're kind of like big stone wheels set into the desert, and they're super old, about 2,000 years or even older. And much like the famous Nazca lines, which we've talked about plenty of times on the channel, they can only be viewed from above, and nobody is exactly sure what their purpose was. The wheels weren't really noticed until the 20s when airplanes came around. From the ground, they're hard to spot. I mean, you could see that there are stones there, but you obviously don't get the full picture until you're up high looking down. So why were they made if they couldn't really be appreciated back then? Well, some people think the artists didn't make them for themselves or the people around them, but for beings they believed were looking down at them from the skies. Who were these beings? Was there religious stuff involved here, or did they have some flying friends up above? You tell me. How cool looking are these, right? Ancient depictions of monsters are always fascinating, and I mean, that has to be what these are, right? These sculptures are from ancient Iraq, way back in the Ubaid period, around 4000 BC. They look sorta human, but with undeniably lizard-like features. So are these just imaginative pieces of art, or were the sculptors capturing beings they really saw or even interacted with in real life. They have these long heads, slit-like eyes, and what look to be snouts instead of human mouths. While archaeologists think these figurines could just be symbolic or part of religious beliefs, some also think there could be more to the story. As always, what do you think? The Crucifixion of Christ painting is a famous artwork that shows Jesus nailed to the cross. And this is a scene that's been painted and drawn by artists for centuries, but in one version of this painting, one made by an unknown artist who's been lost to time, something strange seems to be lurking in the background. Take a look. So you see those flying objects in the back. What do they look like to you? In this 1350 fresco from the Visoki Dekani Monastery in Kosovo, Serbia, there are these weird flying objects in the sky. There are two people seated inside them. Now, something important to note is that this was painted long after the events depicted in the painting, so it's not like whoever made this was drawing exactly what they saw. Obviously, there's a lot of artistic license here, but it was also made long before planes were a thing. So what are these flying things supposed to be? Could there have been visitors flying through the sky at the time the artist was creating the work and he just decided to add them in? It's possible. Also very likely that these are just abstract versions of the sun and moon. A plane vanishes in 1955 and then lands 37 years later. The world's biggest particle collider might have cracked open reality itself, and people swear things have felt off ever since. And is it possible that we're all immortal? I'll explain later. These are disturbing signs that you're already living in a parallel universe. Is it possible that we're all immortal? Not in the way that you'll never age or anything like that, but in a more like you'll never die kind of way. It's called quantum immortality, and it's one of the weirder consequences of quantum physics. Here's the basic idea. Most of us have probably heard of the theory that multiple realities form from every decision we make, every situation we find ourselves in. In quantum mechanics, there's a theory that every time something happens, the universe splits, creating a parallel universe where things went the other way. For example, let's say you're walking across the street and you nearly get hit by a bus. Close call. Well, in another reality, the bus didn't miss. In another, you were nowhere near it. In another, the bus didn't even show up. Now, you, the observer, are at the center of your own timeline. Here's where the immortality aspect comes in. If you can't observe a version of the universe where you're dead, you'll always end up in the one where you survive. That means every time you should have died, you just didn't. At least you don't experience the version where you did. From your point of view, you'll always wake up in the version of reality where you lived. Sure, other people might attend your funeral in their timelines, or the ones you used to be in, but you never actually experience death. You just keep shifting into the universe where you dodged the bullet. Now, I'm not exactly sure where old age comes into this. I mean, eventually we all do die, right? But I don't know, maybe reincarnation plays into this somehow. Look, it's totally unprovable, but it's a neat idea, and at the very least, maybe there's a version of all of our lives where we make it to 100 and pass away peacefully in bed, rather than dying in some awful accident or something. Pan Am Flight 914 is a story that keeps getting passed around because, real or not, it's an interesting story. A Pan Am Douglas DC-4 with 62 people on board took off from New York, headed to Miami on July 2nd of 1955. It vanished. Radio contact was lost, and it was presumed to have crashed. But then something weird happens, just not for another 37 years. In 1992, the same plane allegedly appeared out of nowhere on the radar of an airport in Venezuela. Air traffic control made contact, and the pilot sounded confused, saying they were en route to Miami and due to land at 9:55 a.m., as if no time had passed. The story goes there were witnesses who said the tower told the pilot where he was, which reportedly freaked him out. He supposedly panicked, restarted the engines, and took off again before anyone could stop him. The plane eventually landed in Miami shortly afterward, but authorities supposedly kept the incident quiet. Some versions of the story say the passengers were dazed, carrying outdated newspapers and IDs with no idea that they just jumped forward in time. But is this just an urban legend, or did something actually unexplainable happen that was quickly covered up? The Large Hadron Collider has been at the center of multiple wild theories ever since it switched on in 2008. Officially, it's a massive particle accelerator built by the European Organization for nuclear research, or CERN. It was created to smash atoms together at insane speeds in order to study the makeup of the universe. But there are plenty of people who think that something very strange happened when this thing was switched on, that a sort of Pandora's box was unleashed. One theory is that when the LHC fired up, there was this shift, that it either created a parallel universe or blended ours with another. The timing does kinda line up with when people started reporting strange phenomena on a big scale. The Mandela Effect, for example, really exploded in popularity around the same time, but people also started sharing more personal stories on internet forums about how time just didn't seem to be moving right anymore, or how reality felt off in subtle ways they couldn't quite explain. And it didn't help that in 2016 CERN released a video of what looked like a human sacrifice ritual taking place on their grounds, which they later said was a prank. And do I believe that? Yeah, first of all, I just think that's a funny idea. I love that they went there. And I also just don't think there was a genuine ritual sacrifice captured on camera here. For anyone who is already skeptical though, they were even more skeptical after this. But what do you think? Have you noticed weird shifts in your reality since 2008? I'll give you this, it is a weirder world we're living in.
For centuries, the legend of El Dorado, the fabled city of gold, has lured adventurers deep into the jungles of South America. But what if El Dorado wasn't just a city of wealth, but a portal to another world? Some folks believe that El Dorado's allure wasn't just in its treasure, but in its connection to a highly advanced civilization that may have understood interdimensional travel. Hidden in the thick jungles, the city's precise location remains a mystery, but theories suggest it might exist in a dimension parallel to ours, revealed only to those who possess the right knowledge. The countless expeditions that have vanished without a trace could be due to the city's potential to exist in another realm entirely, a place of hidden knowledge that has been kept secret for millennia. What if all those explorers stumbled into another dimension? Nan Madol, an ancient city built on artificial islands in the middle of a lagoon off the coast of Pompeii, is one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the entire world. With over 90 islets connected by canals, it's often called the Venice of the Pacific. The city's massive basalt stones and perfectly arranged structures suggest that its builders had knowledge that went way beyond anything seen at the time. Legend says the city was built by twin sorcerers who levitated the stones with the help of a flying dragon. How cool is that? It hints at otherworldly powers for sure. Some people believe that Nan Madol is not just a city lost to time, but a remnant of a civilization that was linked to interdimensional forces. Could it be that Nan Madol is a gateway? One that has been hidden beneath the sea, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? The largest religious monument in the world, it is not just an architectural marvel, it is a cosmic puzzle. This stunning temple complex, built way back in the 12th century, aligns perfectly with celestial bodies. It makes you wonder if it was designed as a gateway to the heavens, or even a doorway to another dimension. Researchers have long speculated that Angkor Wat wasn't merely a temple to honor Hindu gods, but a metaphysical portal built with advanced knowledge of astronomy and geometry. Its intricate layout and mysterious carvings hint at something far beyond earthly worship, perhaps a means to connect with other realms. The temple's alignment with the stars, especially the constellation of Orion, strengthens the theory that the Khmer Empire may have understood cosmic forces and used them to access higher planes of existence. Could the temple have been a physical bridge to another world? Some believe it was a cosmic conduit, a gateway lost to time but still present in the design, waiting for those who can decipher its secrets. It is definitely mind-blowing to think about. The Great Pyramids are one of history's most enduring mysteries. These colossal structures, built with almost supernatural precision, are aligned with the stars in ways that still baffle us today. The theory that the pyramids are more than just tombs has gained traction over the years. theories. Some suggest they could be portals to other realms, designed to connect our world with higher planes of existence. The mysterious shafts inside the pyramids point towards specific stars, and the discovery of hidden chambers within these ancient monuments has only deepened the mystery. Could the pyramids have been constructed as a kind of interdimensional gateway? Energy readings around the pyramid complex have shown unusual magnetic and electromagnetic activity. This leads some to believe that the pyramids might not just be relics of the past, but functioning devices, channels to another world or dimension. With theories pointing to both advanced ancient knowledge and mysterious energies, the pyramids may hold the key to understanding alternate realities. It's definitely interesting to consider. The Cave of Swallows, located in Mexico, is a deep pit cave with one of the most stunning vertical drops in the world. At 1,093 feet deep, it's the second deepest pit in Mexico, but it's not just its depth that's fascinating. It is the strange, mystical phenomena that surround it. The cave is home to countless birds, including the white-collared swifts that perform an almost ritualistic dive every evening. Watching the swifts plummet downwards, pulling their wings into free fall is mesmerizing, but it also stirs up some questions. Could this dramatic plunge into the earth be symbolic of a journey between worlds? Local legends suggest that the cave may have served as an entrance to the underworld for ancient cultures, and its overwhelming size and mysterious echoes fuel the idea that it could have been more than just a natural formation. Some have even suggested that the cave's eerie, almost otherworldly atmosphere might be linked to a portal, a passage to other dimensions hidden beneath the surface. It's definitely like something out of a movie. Hidden beneath the Mexican desert, the Cave of Crystals in Chihuahua is like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Inside, massive crystals, some up to 36 feet long, glow eerily in the dark. Their sheer size and beauty are astonishing, but the crystals are more than just geological wonders. The cave's extreme conditions, temperatures reaching up to 136 degrees Fahrenheit with nearly 100% humidity, makes it nearly impossible for humans to visit without specialized equipment. But here's the really puzzling part. Could these massive, almost otherworldly crystals be more than just natural formations? Some believe that they were deliberately placed there by an ancient civilization, possibly to harness their energy for ritualistic purposes, or perhaps to open gateways to other realms. With their unique properties, such as the ability to amplify energy, the crystals might serve as a key to unlocking interdimensional travel. Are they simply geological wonders, or do they hold the secrets to accessing other realities? It definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it?
A voice on an answering machine, carrying on a full conversation its owner swears he never had. Two teens in a summer camp are pulled into the sky by lights, and a college student preps for an assignment that suddenly vanishes. Was it the assignment that disappeared though, or did they somehow switch to another reality? These are more mysterious times people claim to visit a parallel world and came back changed. From Reddit user Flamingo comes an unsettling experience with an answering machine. Goes as follows. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, "Hey, it's me, kill all extremists. Sorry, I missed you. Call you later. Bye," and then hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he calls me back and he says, "Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, there was a slight pause, and then it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so, with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I did not recognize. You could compare it to the message I know I did leave. The two voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but the talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that records the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and analyzed, unfortunately. Also, I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky. I can't explain it. Back in the summer of 1968, two teenagers working at a summer camp in Vermont, 16-year-old Michael Lapp and 19-year-old Janet Carnell, were just hanging out by the dock, watching the sun set over Lake Champlain. Most of the camp was empty because the kids were away at a swim meet. Pretty peaceful scene, but it didn't last. Michael spotted a weird light in the sky. At first he figured it was just a star, but then it suddenly dropped and started coming toward them. Soon, three smaller lights broke off from the main glow and started zigzagging over the water in ways no plane or helicopter could. The lights got closer, formed a triangle, and then one dove straight into the lake. Michael described the sound that followed like a, quote, 1,000 tuning forks, which is such an oddly specific comparison to make. Then he noticed a transparent dome on the craft, and inside were what he described as two childlike creatures with big heads, long necks, and huge eyes. The craft shot a beam at them, so Michael grabbed Janet and pulled her down as they felt themselves begin floating into the air. The next thing they knew, they were back sitting on the dock. But it was much later. Both were disoriented, and Janet seemed almost in a trance. Years later, Michael started having recurring nightmares, always about being taken. He recalled being inside the ship, seeing Janet examined, looking up through the dome at Earth and the stars. Janet later recalled the event, describing it almost exactly as Michael had, only she hadn't spoken to him in years. Researcher Walter Webb eventually concluded that the two had, quote, no opportunity for collusion, and that they'd experienced a, quote, real external event of unknown origin. Reddit user MissPack01 had a very odd experience with a school assignment. They write, I'm going to college in British Columbia, Canada, and I'm taking a business class. So first week of February, our teacher talks about an assignment that'll be due March 2nd. It's a 3-page paper with references on something we've learned in the class. That night he posts a little thing about due date and expectation and formatting, blah blah blah. I start the paper early to get it out of the way, but of course, life and work get in the way, so I forget about it for a week. Fast forward to yesterday's class and I start freaking out about the assignment. I go to my folder on the computer and it's not there for some reason. Oh no, maybe I forgot to save. Unlikely, but possibly. So when I get to class, I ask him if he wants it submitted online, because I didn't see a Dropbox, or handed in physically on Monday. Here's where it gets weird. He doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about. Says there never was any assignment. I got him to look on the course site where he posted the outline and nothing was there. I asked a couple classmates and nobody had a clue what I was talking about either. This is so weird. I'm only taking 2 classes as I work full time, so no, I did not get the assignment mixed with another class. In the last month, did I somehow walk through a door to another universe? Well, I can't tell you for sure, Redditor, but if I switched to a parallel universe that meant everything stayed normal, but I no longer had homework due, I would count that as a win. This one comes from a Redditor named Carla Ray 14, and if the title of the post, I'm convinced my parallel universe self was speaking to my family, doesn't creep you out already, then just listen to this. So about 5 years before she made the post, Carla's parents and 2 sisters were traveling around Europe. She stayed home with her husband and their baby. Well, one night at 3 a.m. her phone starts ringing. It's her dad. She ignores it at first, thinking maybe he forgot about the time difference, but then it rings again and again. When she finally checks her phone, she sees a dozen missed calls and a pile of messages from her family, all saying things like, everything will be okay, we're going to get the next flight home to be with you, stay strong, we love you. Completely freaked out, she answers the next call and demands to know what's going on. Her dad, sounding really shaken, tells her, I've just been on the phone with you for an hour. What do you mean, what's going on? He insists that she called him in tears, saying her husband left her after she told him she was pregnant. Carla's husband was literally asleep beside her though. She says, Dad, what are you talking about? He's right here. He hasn't walked out on me, and I'm definitely not pregnant. Her family swore it was her voice on the line though. Even her sister said she talked with Carla during the call, heard a friend in the background, and got details like Carla canceling her dentist appointment. Something that was actually true, but only her husband knew about. Carla had to send a photo of her and her husband right then and there to prove that nothing happened. And to this day, her dad just shakes his head and says, "I don't know what to believe." Is it possible someone was just making a prank call? I mean, I guess maybe, but they guessed a lot of specific details if that's the case. Is it also possible that some version of Carla from a parallel universe managed to call her dad in this one? I don't know. What do you guys think? So it's a sweltering day in July of 1954 at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. A man arrives on an international flight and walks up to customs. Everything seems routine. He looks European, speaks multiple languages, and has a legit-looking passport, from a distance that is. Looking at it up close, turns out this passport says he's from a country called Torrid. Never heard of it? Neither had the Japanese officials. They ask him to point it out on a map, and without hesitation he points to the area around where Andorra is, between France and Spain, but he's confused. He insists Torrid has been a country for over 1,000 years. The customs officers are confused, to say the least. Is this a joke? Is the guy just out of his mind? The guy seems just as confused as they are. His passport has stamps from other countries, including past visits to Japan, and he has multiple currencies in his wallet. He even mentions a business trip and says he's got meetings set up with a company in Tokyo, but when the officials call the company, they say they've never heard of him. Same story with the hotel that he claimed to have booked. At this point, they're really not sure what to do with him, so they put him up in a hotel room under guard for the night while they try to figure things out. But by the next morning, he's gone. The room was locked from the outside. There was no way out, at least none that the guards wouldn't have been able to see. To this day, no one knows who he was or where he came from, really. Some think he slipped into our world from another reality and then slipped right back out. Others think this whole story is just a good old-fashioned urban legend, but if we seriously consider the possibility that the multiverse really is a thing, well then this story starts to sound a little less outlandish. The Marcahuasi Stone Forest in Peru is one of those places that seems to have a ton of weird stuff happening. People have been talking about strange occurrences there for years, mostly because the place is filled with these huge stone structures that look like they belong to some ancient civilization. But there are also some strange stories surrounding this place. Well, one goes that a group of hikers got a lot more than they bargained for when they camped here. While hanging out, they started to hear some music coming from what seemed like a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It sounded like a celebration. The group looked around and sure enough, they spotted a stone cabin lit up from the inside, and they could see people dancing through the windows. The people were dressed like they were from the 1600s, all in old-fashioned clothes. Naturally, one of the hikers decided to check things out. She got closer to the cabin, and the closer she got, the stranger things became. Her friend noticed that she was acting off, like her body was stiff and she wasn't walking right. It got even weirder when she suddenly couldn't move her arm, like she was partially paralyzed. They managed to pull her away from the cabin, and she snapped out of it right away. People who know the area say the Marcahuasi might be some kind of doorway between dimensions or timelines. The idea is that certain spots on Earth might have thin barriers to other worlds, and that cabin could have been a glimpse into some different time. This story comes from a Reddit user named Albert Norman 2069, who shared an experience that left him questioning everything about the world. It had all started on June 28, 2014, a day that seemed normal at first. He'd woken up, brushed his teeth, ate breakfast, and headed out to work. But as he turned on the car radio, something wasn't right. Instead of the usual music, the station was airing a talk show. The host was excitedly talking about something called Victory in the Great War, and praising the troops for their role in this victory. At first, the Redditor thought maybe it was some kind of special segment, but the more the host went on, the stranger things got. There was talk of a victory in Italy, and something about the Second Great Depression finally coming to an end. He was confused, but he ended up brushing things off. It was probably just fictional. But then things started getting even stranger when he was at work. During lunch, he overheard his coworkers talking about the same victory in Italy, and they kept mentioning the numbers 33 to 13. When he asked what they were talking about, they acted like he was the odd one for not knowing. And when he asked about a coworker named Sam, who didn't seem to be there, no one seemed to remember it. At least something was very off. On his way home, he decided to take a different route to avoid traffic, and that's when he noticed that the city looked worse than he remembered. Buildings were crumbling, some were abandoned, and there were banners everywhere again friends celebrating this mysterious victory. When he finally got home, he flicked on the news. The anchors were talking about the victory in Italy and how the US was dealing with a war abroad. Europe was also in chaos, and the US was in an even worse depression than the 1930s. Of course, things went back to normal by the next day. So was it just a really vivid dream? Well, possibly. But perhaps Albert Norman 2069 really did spend a day in a much darker version of our own reality. Next up are some pretty strange cave paintings, the Wanjinas, some of the most mysterious and downright eerie cave art on Earth. These ancient paintings are found in the Kimberley region of northwestern Australia, painted by Aboriginal tribes whose culture has been going strong for over 60,000 years. The Wanjinas, according to legend, were sky beings, spirits from the clouds who came down during dream time, said to be this time when the Earth was still being formed. These beings supposedly created the land, animals, people, everything. They taught the Aboriginals how to live, and then they vanished. Some say they returned to the stars, others say they went underground. But, I mean, just look at these cave paintings, the big black eyes, the pale skin, they look like aliens. But this art is estimated to be tens of thousands of years old, long before anyone was talking about aliens, at least not in the modern sense. Kinda makes you wonder, are the Wanjinas more than just myth? Did these ancient tribes actually encounter something from beyond the stars, or maybe even from a parallel reality? This final story comes from Reddit user GoodResolve33 and goes as follows. When I was younger, my cousins and I would play in my aunt's basement during major holiday parties. Parents would be upstairs and we would all just hang out and mess around in the basement, entertaining ourselves with whatever junk was down there. Well, there was a metal door down there with a bolt lock that we never touched. But one day, we unlocked the door and we saw a major boxing event going on. I'm talking Jumbotron, bright lights, arena, and a major crowd. Everything seemed to freeze when we opened the door though. People in the crowd turned around to look at us. Fighters stopped fighting, the referee signaled us out, and we saw shadows in the crowd running toward us. It all sounds crazy, but I remember how scared we were. We shut the door, ran upstairs, and sat in the living room with our parents. I remember them being like, "What's going on with these guys?" As we sat in the living room silent, crapping ourselves because we thought we were going to get in trouble. Fast forward to much later, I tried to tell my parents, and they swear that I imagined it. I thought I did too for the longest time, until randomly, one of my cousins from that day hit me up after so long of not communicating, only to bring up that same event, detail for detail as I described and remembered it. I go back to that house to check out the door. Across the door is the neighbor's basement door, since it was a duplex, and stairs leading up the metal basement doors that come out to the backyard. Not sure what the F that was, and I promise you I'm not that crazy. I get goosebumps thinking about the situation sometimes because it makes absolutely zero sense.
Parallel universes have been the question that we have been trying to answer for years. Time travelers, glitches, Mandela Effect, all possible answers to this fantastical theory. Noah, the alleged time traveler from 2030. Back in 2018, this guy had taken the world by storm. Although supposedly being from 2030, he's traveled all across the spectrum to the years 2060, 1999, and the year 2120, to which he also supposedly had video proof of what it would all look like. He explains that the clip he took was from Las Vegas and showcases flying cars to tall futuristic looking buildings and a very peculiar looking orange sky. Noah explained, "The red clouds are global warming. You can see it's everywhere. I can remember it being incredibly hot. I'm pretty sure they are working on it in the future." He also stated that some really crazy predictions for the future, some key ones being Martin Luther King Jr.'s granddaughter will become president, scientists live on Mars, Instagram becoming a thing of the past, cures for illnesses, and finally being able to talk to aliens. Noah also disclosed taking anti-aging pills that keep him the same age throughout his journeys, since he claims that time traveling makes you gain years. Of course, no one really believed any of this, especially with the video, to most people looking like a cheap 3D rendering. One commenter even pointed out that he's using a phone from our time to show this, rather than some crazy futuristic one. Despite all this though, he took a lie detector test that really put him on the radar, and he passed it with flying colors. What he was saying came out truthfully. But then again, this wasn't done by professionals or with professional equipment, so who's to say if it means it's actually true? The deja vu and parallel universe theory. I had speculated this theory for a few years now, and I'm really happy that other people are discussing it. Majority of us know what deja vu is. A moment in our lives where we get this strange feeling that we've done something like this before. It's French for already seen, and there are some scientific theories for why this happens, such as temporal overlap. This is when the long-term and short-term memories blur together for a moment. Or subconscious familiarity, where your new surroundings have some similarities to an old one. The last being neural delays that create a false feeling that some event has occurred. But I like parallel universes theory better. To explain my favorite version of the theory, a deja vu is when your other self in a different universe and you in this universe accidentally overlap the same timelines. The two of you are living very different experiences, but for some reason we have one, or a few if you're like me, moments in time where the two timelines collide at the exact perfect moment. Our lives perfectly linked up together based on whatever choices we made to get us in that exact same moment of time. I would also love to hear your theories about this down in the comments below. This is a great way to transition into the mirror image universe theory. It could also link to the deja vu theory, but this theory specifically focuses on the moments before the Big Bang, and scientists coming up with a hypothesis that there was a universe completely mirror image to our version today. However, the only difference is that time is moving backwards in that universe. I'm not going to try and get deep with it, but the basic understanding of this theory is that the Big Bang is the center point of time, and because scientists believe in heavy symmetry within the universe, when it happened, it also created a negative version of time of our universe alongside ours. So, when you think of cracking an egg, what would happen instead in the other universe is that it would start out from the yolk on the ground and turn back into the egg. This theory started back in 2015, when some scientists were up in Antarctica researching high-energy particles. What we did know before is that there are high-energy particles coming towards Earth, which from my understanding is because our universe is constantly expanding outward. However, they discovered high-energy particles going away from our Earth in the opposite direction, as if they were going back in time. There was something pulling or stretching these particles the opposite way, as if the universe is expanding in another direction simultaneously. Let's take a brain breather with some Mandela effects. This one, specifically from Toy Story, is new to me. Do you remember Woody's catchphrase being, "There's a snake in my boot"? Because that's how I remember it, and the majority of people who grew up with it. But we were wrong, because the actual phrase of it goes, "There's a snake in my boots." It was plural, and it was never singular. But of course, the internet didn't agree with this, with the biggest reason being that it grammatically doesn't make sense. The proper sentence should be, "There are snakes in my boots." And it also doesn't help with the fact that the Woody toys that came out all say, "There's a snake in my boot." There was no plural for those. So what gives? There was only one Reddit comment claiming that Pixar confirmed it's always been boot and not boots. But I haven't been able to find an article on that. How do you guys remember it? Tell me down in the comments below.
Did some kind of black hole open this girl's apartment? So this woman had a very strange incident involving her Apple Pencil. Seems there was some sort of glitch, but not the type of glitch tech support could help you with. So she talks about how she only has one Apple Pencil, has only ever had one Apple Pencil, and it's immediately recognizable because it was damaged by a dog. She also kept her Apple Pencil in the same place, the case on her desk, by her iPad, but one day a second Apple Pencil suddenly turns up in her apartment, and it's got the same bite marks. Now, if we're to assume this story is true, that is pretty dang strange, but stuff like this happens. I think we've all had an experience in the same kind of vein, finding two of something you thought you only had one of, personal belongings going missing and then turning up in a very obvious spot, stuff like that. What's going on? I can't say for sure, but is it possible that different realities briefly cross over and sometimes items from some parallel version of reality get left behind? I don't know. Back in 1995, NASA pointed the Hubble Space Telescope at what looked like the most boring spot in the sky, an area of darkness in the constellation Ursa Major, where there didn't seem to be anything at all. They left the shutter open for 10 days straight, and when the image came back, it shocked everyone. That quote-unquote empty patch of space was actually packed with thousands of galaxies, not stars, not planets, entire galaxies, each one holding billions of stars. The photo became known as the Hubble Deep Field, and it's still one of the most incredible space images ever taken. It's crazy how far away some of these galaxies are. We're talking about light that left them more than 12 billion years ago, meaning we're literally looking back in time almost to the beginning of the universe. And this was just one tiny piece of sky. Astronomers compared it to looking through a straw. They later repeated the experiment with newer cameras, creating the Ultra Deep Field and the Extreme Deep Field, which revealed even more distant galaxies. Some of the faintest smudges in those pictures are the oldest galaxies ever seen. In this next clip, a group of people are hanging outside when they notice something strange. It's the middle of the night, but all of a sudden the sky lights up bright blue, like it instantly turned into daytime. And then, just as quick, everything snaps back to darkness. And yeah, there's a storm rolling in, you can see heavy clouds and faint flashes of lightning in the distance, but this was clearly not a normal lightning strike. The whole sky lit up so bright it looked like the sun had risen for a few seconds before disappearing again. And finally, this strange video was posted by a girl who seems to be experiencing something mysterious in her backyard, in that it changes when she goes from her balcony to the ground floor. And then she opens the back door and steps outside, and so as you can see, the backyard looks totally different from the view we saw on the balcony. Where did all the garbage go? Now, assuming this isn't a hoax, which is always possible, this is a pretty strange situation. But speaking of garbage though, I mean, I don't know if she had a party the night before or something, but dear God, what is with all that trash? Don't live like that. Raccoons are gonna get into it. Some things shouldn't exist, like a car crash that happened 5 months ago showing up again in real time, or subatomic particles flying the wrong way through Earth like the laws of physics just aren't applying anymore, or an eerie cold spot in the sky that might be a bruise left over from our universe colliding with another one. Could all of this be possible evidence of parallel universes? What you're looking at here is obviously police inspecting a crashed car, but this was no normal car. This is known as the Surrey ghost car case. On December 11th of 2002, multiple calls came into the police about a car swerving off the road and crashing into a ditch near an exit ramp in Surrey, England. Police show up, expecting to find a fresh crash and maybe help a driver in trouble, but they find something stranger. At first, the officers don't see anything unusual, it's just another crash site, but as they get closer, they spot this old, overgrown vehicle. And they do find the driver, but he's no longer alive, and hadn't been for a long time. And I don't mean hours, I mean months. It was the body of a man named Christopher Brian Chandler. He'd been missing for months. Based on the state of the car and the body, the police quickly determined the crash had happened 5 months earlier, back in July of the same year. Christopher's family confirmed that he had been missing since then. So the question was, what were people actually seeing on that cold December night when they phoned the police? There were no other accidents to be found. Some people believe they were seeing a sort of ghost car, a glimpse into another reality. Could it have been a time slip where the crash from the past somehow overlapped with the present moment? Some people think the reports of a crash were from a parallel universe or timeline, and the car appeared in real time for just a brief moment before disappearing. No one really knows for sure, and we'll probably never get the full answer, but it's a perfect example of how strange the world can be, and that maybe there's more going on than we can ever hope to understand. Now, what you're looking at here is known as a cold spot, deep out in space. Back in 2004, astronomers detected an anomaly in the cosmic microwave background, or CMB, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang. This cold spot is noticeably cooler than its surroundings, spanning approximately 1.8 billion light years. At first, scientists attributed this to a vast, empty supervoid, a massive region with fewer galaxies, but studying it further using more precise measurements, there's some doubt about that explanation, suggesting the void might not be as large or as empty as they thought. Well, so what does this mean though? Well, the discrepancy has led some researchers to wonder if the so-called cold spot could could be the result of our universe colliding with another universe during the early stages of cosmic inflation. A collision like that could have left an imprint in the CMB, giving us possible evidence for the existence of parallel universes. This is the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA for short. It's a NASA-funded experiment designed to detect high-energy cosmic neutrinos by capturing radio waves emitted when these particles interact with the Antarctic ice sheet. During its flights, ANITA spotted several events where particles appeared to be traveling upward through the Earth instead of coming down from up in space. Scientists were very confused because that's not supposed to happen. Particles like neutrinos had never been seen passing through the Earth like that. Well, one hypothesis is that these anomalies could be explained by the existence of a parallel universe where the laws of physics, including the direction of time, are reversed. In this scenario, particles originating from a mirror universe could travel upward through our planet. In 2019, scientists dropped what looked like a blurry orange donut onto the internet and basically broke science Twitter for a week. What people were seeing was the first real photographic evidence of a black hole, snapped by the Event Horizon Telescope. Now, what we're looking at isn't the black hole itself, technically, because physics just won't let us actually see the thing. What it is the glowing gas and light bending around the edges of the black hole. That ring is the Event Horizon, a one-way ticket to nowhere, or maybe somewhere else. See, theoretical physicists like Nikodem Pawlowski think that black holes might not just absorb stuff into nothingness, but may instead be gateways to other universes. His theory says when matter collapses into a black hole, it might not get crushed out of existence, but instead get funneled into an entirely new universe on the other side. Like, imagine every black hole being the Big Bang for a different reality. It's all based on some deep theoretical physics. No one can prove it yet, but it does fit in with the idea about multiverses and bouncing universes instead of just one big beginning. So yeah, maybe this blurry space donut isn't just a hole, maybe it's a door. What you're looking at here is a piece of what's called Kirlian photography. Back in the late 1930s, a guy named Simon Kirlian figured out that if you zap something with a high voltage current and take a picture of it, you get these weird glowing outlines around the object. Plants, apples, people's fingers, suddenly they all looked like they had some kind of electric aura around them. It was like photographing life energy, or maybe something from some other reality bleeding into ours. Now, people still argue about what this actually shows. Some say it's just moisture or static or whatever. Cool, noted. But we're here to talk about the weird and unexplained. So others think this glow is something deeper, a glimpse into another layer of existence, something we can't see with our eyes, but might be there all the time, kind of like the Force. Some even claim these energy fields shift with your mood or health, and if you believe the more far-out theories, you're literally watching energy from another dimension react in real time. No one's ever managed to fully explain it, but the fact that a basic electrical rig might be snapping pics of alternate layers of reality, that's the kind of stuff that does keep you up at 3 a.m. scrolling deeper and deeper into the weirder parts of the internet.
Next up today we have The Vanishing Hotel. A French couple traveling in the 1970s decided to stay at a quaint, seemingly out-of-place hotel in the countryside. The hotel and its staff appeared to belong to an earlier time, and the couple noted peculiarities such as the absence of telephones or modern amenities. I feel like that's a really big red flag. I don't know. No telephones at a hotel? What is this, Norman Bates? Upon trying to find the hotel again on a subsequent trip, it was nowhere to be found, and no one in the area could recall its existence, suggesting a possible slip into a parallel world. At our halfway point today, we have the interdimensional ring. A person reported finding a very unique ring that did not belong to them in their home. Despite thorough investigations, they could not trace the ring's origins or how it came into their possession. You just know that somebody in that household was getting accused of cheating in that moment. The mysterious ring ring appeared to possess unusual characteristics and design unlike any common jewelry. Its style did not match any known era or culture, which only deepened the mystery surrounding it. As the person wore the ring, peculiar incidents began to unfold. Objects in their home seemed to move independently, and time appeared to distort, with hours passing in what felt like minutes. On several occasions, the wearer claimed to see fleeting glimpses of otherworldly landscapes or to hear whispers in an unrecognizable language. These experiences intensified the belief that the ring was not merely an object of unknown provenance, but a conduit to parallel dimensions, offering brief, disorienting peeks into these alternate realities that coexist with our own. Would you want a ring with that kind of power, or would you journey across the land to destroy it in a fiery pit? Next up, we have the flight into the future. In the 1930s, a British pilot claimed to have flown into a cloud bank only to emerge in what seemed to be the future. He described seeing unfamiliar aircraft and an altered landscape, but upon returning to his own time, he reported the incident, but unfortunately there was just no evidence to substantiate his experience. This story has been interpreted by some as a possible encounter with a time slip or a parallel dimension, but to me, it really is just giving Manifest. I don't know if you guys have seen that show, but it's crazy, and I feel like maybe that show was based on what happened here. I don't know. Next up today we have the quantum thought exercise, just simultaneously my favorite and least favorite on this entire list, because it stresses me out. While not an anecdote of an actual event, the quantum thought experiment is often associated with the idea of quantum immortality and is related to the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Imagine a situation similar to the Schrodinger's cat experiment, where a physicist uses a potentially lethal mechanism that is triggered or not triggered based on a quantum event, like the decay of a radioactive atom. Okay, I know it sounds confusing. Stay with me, alright? In this thought experiment, every time the mechanism has a chance to be triggered, the universe would split, creating one reality where the physicist survives and another where they do not. However, the physicist, as an observer, would only ever experience the outcomes where they survive, hence the term quantum immortality. They would seemingly jump from one universe to another where they continue living, never experiencing their own death. The idea here is that, from the physicist's perspective, they might feel as though they are transitioning into different parallel universes where they continue to exist. It is a very mind-bending concept that suggests that our consciousness could persist in a multiverse, experiencing only those branches of reality where we survive. It's interesting, scary, unsettling. I don't know, that's just how I feel about this one. We have the alternate phases of Highway 167. There are accounts of people driving on familiar roads only to find themselves in completely unfamiliar landscapes or towns that just should not exist along their route. One particular story involves Highway 167, where drivers reported entering foggy patches and emerging into surroundings that appeared to be from a different time period or just a completely different reality, only to return to their known world upon retracing their route. It's just so creepy. I feel like we've talked about like a few specific scenarios that kind of deal with the same thing before. Just is so unsettling. I don't know, there's just something weird about that. Next up, we have the man who woke up in a different marriage. This story is about a man who claimed to have woken up next to a woman he recognized, but in a life that wasn't his. He had memories of life with another woman, his actual wife, but in this new reality he was married to an old girlfriend. His job was different, and even his car in the driveway was not the one that he remembered. Despite extensive searches, he found no evidence of his former life and began to question his sanity until he suddenly returned to his original world with everything back to normal. This does sound like an absolute nightmare, but it also, like, you know, sometimes people think like, what would have happened if like things went this way or whatever, so maybe it would be kind of cool to get like a glimpse. Okay, and finally today we have the non-existent hotel, back with another strange hotel experience. This one starts off with a businessman traveling in Europe in the 1970s who claims to have stayed at a beautiful old-fashioned hotel. Nothing wrong with that. Upon returning to the city years later, he was unable to find the hotel. In fact, there were actually no records or evidence that it ever even existed. He even checked his old receipts and documents, which all referenced the hotel, yet no one in the city had any memory of such a place. This led him to believe that he might have spent a night in a parallel dimension. Imagine, you went to this mystery hotel and later realized you were staying in room 1408. Could you imagine? Oh, I would think that my whole life was a lie after that.
This next post is called "I May Have Saved My Dad in Another Universe." It was posted by Karina Nebula 89, and it reads, "My dad died a year ago, and a few months later, I had a dream that felt as real as reality, being wide awake. He was alive in that dream, and I was very confused about that. I remembered the police report I read. He died in his apartment, luckily, seemingly in his sleep, and the police had to break in. He lived in a social house building in which they checked the tenants daily, and when he didn't open the door, they called the police. I remembered the time of death on the police report, and in that dream, that time of date had not happened yet. Another reason why this dream felt so real. I could see dates and everything on my phone clearly. Everything was logical, and time passed normally, like it would while being awake. But the time was approaching. I made a plan to get him to the hospital, but he was taking his sweet time getting ready, and I was getting anxious because I knew the time of death was soon, but he did not really get why I was getting so serious about leaving. Eventually I checked my phone again, and the time was right after the time of death on the police report, and my dad was still alive and well. I was baffled. He still went to the hospital, but while he was on the way there, I woke up." This next post is from Witty Turnover 5585 and reads, "So I'm scrolling YouTube a little bit ago and see a video titled The 11-Day Disappearance of Agatha Christie, and I thought it was a mistake, so I watched the video and a few others to see, sure enough, she was only missing for 11 days. But I vividly remember my favorite show growing up, Unsolved Mysteries, having an episode about her disappearance. And in this episode, she kisses her daughter, walks out the back door, and vanishes, never to be seen again. I thought at the time it was weird because I'd learned about her in school and had to do a book report at one time. So I searched for this particular episode, and there is one of her, but again, she was only gone for 11 days. I think I skipped universes at some point because that's not the history where I'm from. Anyone else have something similar happen? Next up, we have a post by Naoiyyii. Don't know how to pronounce that. It's entitled, "My Maybe Experience in a Different Universe." It was in the middle of the night and I had just woke up. I don't know why I woke up, but I was up. I felt weird. I felt like it was super quiet, like too quiet. I know it was the middle of the night, but it was weird. I felt like everything was down in scale, like my room was smaller, my bed was smaller, and everything was. I was so confused. It was also pitch black outside, like no lights at all. It was weird, and I started crying and ran to my mom's room. My mom was looking at me weird, and she asks me what's wrong. I told her I don't know where I am, with a crying tone, and she just looked at me like I'm crazy. She told me I can lay with her if I want. I was 11 at the time, and I won't forget it. I swear everything was too quiet and dark. When I woke up, I felt completely normal, and it seemed like nothing had happened. My mom also, for some reason, didn't even know I went into her room that night, but maybe she was just too tired to remember. And finally, we have a Reddit post by EqualStance99 entitled, "Shirt suddenly went missing and then appeared a few days later." Hi, I've had a few encounters throughout my life that are mostly explainable using logic. However, I cannot find any explanation to this experience. I took some pants and shirt out of my cupboard and put them on my bed to get dressed. I turned around, closed the cupboard, but when I turned back around to get dressed, the shirt was just missing. I searched everywhere, but I just couldn't find it. Yesterday, the shirt appeared back in my cupboard, neatly folded, as if I had never touched it. I am positive that I didn't miss it, because upon its return, it was on the top of all my shirts, and no other one is that color. I am beyond bewildered at this simple yet unexplainable occurrence. From the mysteries of the paranormal to time slips and quantum entanglement, these are unexplained phenomena that scientists blame on parallel universes. So let's start things off with ghosts. You probably didn't think I'd be starting off like this, but I think you could make a pretty good argument for paranormal stuff like this being a sign of possible parallel universe. Almost all of us have heard someone's first-hand account of having seen something, or feeling cold spots, hearing noises that don't seem to have a logical explanation. The usual explanation, aside from the ones made by skeptics, is that these are signs of hauntings, usually a dead person who's not able to fully cross over to the other side, so they remain in this limbo between the world of the living and the dead, tied to the places they once called home. But what if these so-called ghosts aren't actually spirits or souls, but glimpses into another universe? What if what we interpret as paranormal activity could be caused by parallel universes overlapping? Imagine it like looking through a frosted window. You can see movement on the other side, shadows and shapes, but they're not really there in the way we understand it. Maybe at times in certain places, the line between dimensions gets a little fuzzy, and you catch a brief glance into a parallel world. Instead of a ghost haunting you, maybe it's just a glimpse of someone from a different version of reality. Next, we've got time slips. Ever had a moment where you're sure you were somewhere, but everyone else insists you weren't, or vice versa? Now, if this happens to you a lot, definitely see a doctor before chalking it up to what some idiot online like me says, but if you've been cleared of any early signs of dementia, then maybe something stranger could be going on. Some people think these experiences could be linked to parallel universes, the idea being that we can sometimes slip between timelines. One minute you could be at a party, the next you're back home, but with no memory of how you got there. Or you might be walking down a street and suddenly the surroundings look completely different, like you've been dropped into a past version of your city. This sounds pretty ridiculous, and I can't say that I've ever experienced anything like this, but some people say they have. You can find stories like this all over places like Reddit. Not that you should believe everything you read online, but even if a small handful of these stories happen to be true, that is pretty strange. Some people think time slips could happen when two timelines briefly overlap, and your consciousness gets caught in this switch. You're still you, but somehow you're seeing a different version of events, like a time traveler who doesn't even know that they're time traveling. Now let's talk about something a bit more sciencey, quantum entanglement. This is a phenomenon where two particles become linked in such a way that when something happens to one, the other is instantly affected, no matter how far apart they are. Yes, this really does happen, despite the fact that what I just described doesn't seem to follow the rules of space and time. It's as if the particles are somehow aware of each other across these vast distances. We still don't know exactly why this happens, and if you wanted to make the argument, which I am, it could possibly point to, at the very least, a glitch in the Matrix, similar to the parallel universes theory. A glitch in the Matrix meaning that the world around us is an illusion created by who knows what. Point is, our universe may just be one of many. Could we exist in this complex web of overlapping universes where every now and then one of the strands twitches in a way we don't understand, causing a mysterious and unexplainable phenomena like this? Alright, let's talk deja vu. Sure, this gets talked about a lot, but for good reason. It's pretty disconcerting. Every time it happens, it throws me off. I'm always left with this uneasy, existential dread for about 30 seconds before I get on with my day, but it's this brief reminder that despite everything science tells us, and as clear as the world seems at face value, there are a lot of things we just don't understand. It's eerie, but kind of humbling. How can we be experiencing a sequence of events so specific that we logically know that it's the first time we've lived it, and yet somehow there's this feeling in the pit of our stomach that, no, we've been here before, seen this play out. It's not a memory, more like something you've seen in a dream, maybe? It's vivid yet hazy at the same time. There are tons of theories on deja vu. One being that you have lived the exact moment, but in a different life. That time either runs in a constant loop, or a parallel universe running right along our own briefly overlaps and gives us that strange, uncanny feeling. Think of it like your brain momentarily accessing memories from a different version of yourself, one who's living a slightly different life, but maybe in this other version you did something exactly like what you're doing right now, and for a split second your brain glitches and pulls that memory into the current moment. You're living in the present moment, but your mind receives a kind of signal from a different timeline.